Mirette Abraham, it is such a joy having you on Finding Hope today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. I want to apologize from the get-go for my awkward, like I said, fangirling moments. So please forgive me in advance.
It's so good for my ego, but don't worry, we're all awkward here. It's the perfect place to be awkward. Mirette, starting with a bit of an icebreaker, which as an awkward person I actually hate. But one of my favorite questions to ask is, how would you introduce yourself to a stranger?
So I'm a medical doctor. I work in the field of cancer care, specifically training in radiation oncology. So if you're ever around, Southwest Sydney way, you might come across me in the hospitals or the clinics if you're, you know, unlucky enough to have me as one of your clinical physicians. But yes, that's where I'm mostly based. And I am training, like I said. So I'm not fully there. And I feel like, in medicine, we're constantly studying and training. So who knows when that's going to happen?
Oh, the fact that you're doing this as a mum of two already is just incredible to me. Mirette, have you always wanted to be a doctor? When did you first decide that you wanted to go into this field?
Okay, so don't laugh, but I wanted to be a doctor really towards the end of my high school years. And really, it was the thought of helping people or just being in a field where I'm with people at their most vulnerable moments. To me, it's a sort of ministry, to minister to these people in their most trying times, and also a service for me because I feel like being around everyone who needs help or people who need help and support is a reminder to be prayerful, and to remain clinging to God. So that's where it kind of came from, and that's when it started. So the passion really was sparked at the end of high school. Right before that, though, I did want to be a fashion designer. And the fashion industry at the time in Australia wasn't that crash hot. It was really hard to make it. So I'm like, I could do fashion design and maybe, do a bit of decorating or styling work on the side just to make an income. So the shift is very dramatic. And I don't know when the turning point was, to be honest. We don't have any doctors in our family that I could have looked up to or could have known, about the struggles in medicine. But yes, that wasn't an always passion, but it got sparked at the end of high school.
Oh, that's so wonderful to hear. Is that the same reason why um, you have a passion for working in cancer care? Because, I hear you talking about it as this service, as this ministry. But I know for so many people, even my friends who are doctors, the thought of oncology, it's too
Mm.
painful. It rips your heart out every day. Why but for you, what you almost willingly walked into it. Why?
It's exactly why, that reason that it is, I feel medicine is a ministry and it's a privilege to be able to work in the field of medicine. Um, and it really is, I feel, a way that God keeps reminding me and tapping me on the heart and keeping me close to Him through my patients and through the stories I hear and through the experiences I have, both in and out of the hospital. I know this might sound a little morbid, but I've always felt drawn to death and dying for that very reason. I feel like so much ministry can occur at the end of someone's life, or even, in the moments where they feel like their life is coming to an end. And not just for them. I think the main ministry and the main service is for me. I feel like I've been served a lot through the patients that I've met. And I feel like God's really spoken to me through the patients that I've met. And my relationship with God has truly, truly taken a remarkable turn in the last 3 years since I've been in cancer care. Only because I've really felt His sweetness in the way that He meets me on the wards and in clinics and the people that He sends my way. And I know, death and dying is kind of scary and, really sad to a lot of people and to most people. And yes, there are some instances and some situations where it's just, it really is emotional. And I've cried in front of patients. I'm not too proud to admit that. I've told them, heartbreaking news, and I've sat with them and cried. And, I'm human at the end of the day, and we're all kind of sharing and suffering together. But I feel like that's just it. We're all kind of suffering our own kind of walks. And, we need to be suffering together. We need to be walking together. We need to be holding each other's hands and, showing each other Christ once again. And if it comes at the end of someone's life, I think that's a beautiful thing. I think it's a beautiful thing for them to know that no matter where you are, no matter what stage of life, even if it is towards the end, there is still hope in Christ. And it isn't really the end, it's a transition. And I think it is a beautiful ministry if you allow yourself to see it that way. But I'm not going to lie and say that every day is like that. Most days it's just work, and it's hard, and it's tiring, and you just want to get home to your babies. And really, those days where I'm like, I just want to leave, I just want to get home, God always sends someone to remind me why I'm here, why I'm doing this job. And so that's what's kept me going, really.
Wow, it's incredible. Um, let's talk about the struggles of the hospital system because it's something that you maybe weren't completely prepared for when you went to study medicine in the first
Mhm.
place. Can you just talk about the hardships there?
Um, the hospital, you know, as a patient, you never kind of see what goes on behind the scenes. And you come in, you get your treatment. Sometimes you're unhappy with the service, with the time delays, with the lack of paperwork, with the lack of direction, the lack of communication. I get that. Um, Once you enter the hospital system, being an intern in a busy environment, with, we're kind of still at the tail end of, when only men were doctors, and we've got lots more women. And so that there is an element of misogyny as well. And so being a young female intern coming into the workforce that's busy, where you're not really trained in that sense at university. You're trained in the knowledge and the clinical practice, and you kind of think you know everything, and then you're catapulted into internship and into an emergency department that's really busy, and onto a ward where there's really not much direction. It's hard, and it can really break some people. And we were always told at the end of our degree, if you make it through internship without crying, you'll be fine. And you take that and you're like, oh, why would I cry? Surely it's not that bad. It can't be as bad as my university degree. But there are moments where you really feel like throwing in the towel because it's hard work. And no matter how much you try, sometimes what you're doing is just never enough. It's never quick enough. It's still quite junior. You still need a lot of support, but unfortunately, with the understaffing and the busyness of the environment, it's not always the case. So you feel like a nuisance a lot of the time. But then you can get really lucky and really find mentors and leaders that guide you down the right path. And I was really lucky in that, I had lots of really good examples to look up to, and really good doctors and physicians who just took me under their wing and helped me out as much as they could. But it is a difficult environment to work in. And I feel like that's important for young people trying to make it in medicine at the moment. The pay is not what you think. We don't get into medicine for the pay. It's not about being a rich doctor. That doesn't exist. It might exist when you're close to retiring, but it definitely doesn't exist early days. And it's as much, there's no glory in the work that you do, the things that you do throughout the day, that the bodily fluids that you have to deal with, the abuse that you deal with from patients. And it's hard to kind of swallow your pride and do that. But I think that's what it is. It really is a humbling experience. And if you look at medicine as the ministry that it really is, all of this stuff is just, it's second grade. It's not important to the goal and the mission at hand. But it needs to be said that medicine is not an easy road. And it's not just about the knowledge that you have and the things that you learn in university. There really is a culture in the hospital, and that's really hard to be overcome by some. But, there are really good examples that you could cling to. And I think, again, if you remind yourself of the ministry that you're doing in the hospital setting, and everything that you do is for the glory of God, all this stuff kind of just gets wiped away, and gets a little easier to deal with.
Mm. Oh, thank you so much for saying that. Such important stuff. Now, Mirette, you worked in the hospital system for a while and had, I don't know, a mini crisis, shall we say? What prompted you kind of leaving and I guess reevaluating?
Yeah. Again, once you go into the hospital system, it's really easy to be swept up with what you need to do to finish. How can I get to my end goal quicker, and as smoothly as possible? So you do all the courses necessary, you do the research, maybe you do a PhD if you have the time or the energy. I did not. But you do all these extra things to make yourself look much more appealing to then the people that are going to give you jobs in the specialty that you really desire to be working in. And so when I got into the hospital system, I kind of got swept up in physician training, and I was really excited to become a physician, a medical physician. And I really did enjoy working with the elderly in geriatrics, and I felt like maybe that's where I should go. Maybe that's where I can be. And, you're still kind of helping the vulnerable, the very vulnerable in our community. And I thought maybe if I pair that up with palliative care, so still dealing with terminal illness, then I still get to do what I want and kind of still work with cancer patients. And I got kind of swept up in that path, and that path really didn't have kids in the plan, and it didn't have kids for a really long time. And, I've got a chronic illness, and for me, I don't know when my fertility clock will end. It's likely sooner than most. And so I remember one friend was coming off a terrible night shift, and I saw him at church the next day, and he just looked awful. He looked like he just had the worst 10 hours of his entire life. And when I asked him, and he didn't really want to talk about it, he just said it was a really bad night shift. I felt like that was the slap I needed. Like, just stop for a second and think about what you're doing. Think about the commitment you're making. You've just committed to another 5, 6 years of training in a busy hospital setting where you do, upwards of 36-hour on-call shifts. You have to come in at crazy times, and your weekends are gone. You're constantly studying. There's no real part-time option. And I just stopped. I'm like, wait, I do want kids. What am I doing here? If I died, I remember asking myself, if I died right now, what would I have to show for my life? I haven't really ministered as much as I wanted. I haven't really done anything of any sort of value, I thought. And I felt like having a kid was, my way of giving my body back to God, giving my body back to someone else. I still haven't even gotten a little bit of my body back since the first kid, so it's completely been given up. But I remember asking myself that question. I know it sounds dramatic, but I felt like I got into medicine for this exact reason, for ministry. But my life is anything but right now, and so I just left. I just told them I'm not going to continue with the training. Please give my position to someone else. And I finished off my residency, and that was it. I was kind of stuck. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a job. But that's kind of the crisis that I went through. And that whole year was really searching for where I was supposed to be. Actually, it ended up being about 2 or 3 years of searching. But God found me, and the call to get into radiation oncology really did come at a really unexpected, miraculous time where I was ready to throw in the towel for the fourth time. And God just called out and he said, actually, no, come back. There's a spot for you. And, this is where I want you to be.
That's incredible. And this was after you'd had your first.
Yes, when I
Oh,
got it, when
yeah,
I got the
after you had
job,
your first.
she was,
Yeah.
I think she was 2 at the time, turning 2. Yeah.
So, Mirette, you left in a dramatic fashion, as you say, but I don't know. As a fellow dramatic person, I feel like this sounds very reasonable questions to be asking yourself. Um, And then you found yourself what you described as the trenches of motherhood. And I really love the word that you used because it is so descriptive and graphic. And I feel like it's not talked about enough. Why do you use the word trenches?
Because that's what it really is. I feel like motherhood, we see a very one sided view of motherhood, be it, out in public or on social media. We see the prettiness and the glamour and mums holding their coffees and their babies and walking their dogs in the sunshine, and it all looks so nice. And I remember, back in high school, we'd all say, myself and a group of friends, like, I can't wait to start working and go on maternity leave and have all this time off and be free. We hadn't even started work, and that's what we were thinking about. We do see a very one-sided view, and motherhood, don't get me wrong, is the most beautiful thing ever, but it is an entire sacrifice of self. It is really putting yourself dead last, and becoming a mum for the first time when you really don't know what to expect, when you feel like your relationship with God may have been one thing before and you're a completely different person now. So that relationship changed, your identity's changed, your body's changed. The changes are sometimes a bit too hard to bear. And we all talk about how easy it is. And we're so focused on the baby. We're so focused on how the baby's going. Are they reaching their milestones? Was the delivery good? Are they a good baby? Are they sleeping well, eating well? And we're so focused on that. And nobody turns to the mum and says, how about you? Like, how are you dealing with this? And I know it's a beautiful thing, and it doesn't negate from its beauty to say that this is hard. This is hard work. And mission is hard, ministry is hard, service is hard, self-sacrifice is the hardest thing. You're giving up your hopes, your body, your dreams. You're giving up so much, and you're completely emptying yourself. And I feel like it's the closest thing to martyrdom, motherhood. It's complete self-denial, and that's hard, but it needs to be talked about. People need to know that you're not alone in thinking that this walk is trying. It is. It's difficult, and it's not for everyone. And so not everyone does it. And so we just need to talk about the trenches a little more so that the women in the trenches don't feel like they're so isolated and that they're, you know, the only people feeling that way. I feel like most of us have felt that or are feeling that at any point in our motherhood journey. We just need to talk about it a little more, I think.
Yeah, let's talk about that because let's talk about how you're feeling. You suffered from postpartum depression after you had your first. You were unprepared. It was unexpected. For someone who's not a mother, can you explain how you were feeling? Try and articulate kind of
Hmm.
yeah your experiences, what you were going through in that time.
Okay. Try doing this without crying, but I apologize. Um, for me, I think I had always had this relationship with God where it sounds very juvenile, but he was like my earthly dad, and really everything I wanted, I got. It was like a give relationship. I thought I had this faith thing down pat. I thought I knew him. I thought really nothing could separate me from that love, and it doesn't. Nothing separates me from that love. But I really felt like nothing could get in the way of that love. Once I became a mum, I really struggled for the first 3 months of motherhood. I was in and out of hospital multiple times. I had multiple complications. The delivery was fine, but immediately after the delivery, my baby ended up in the special care nursery because she went blue and she wasn't breathing, and they had to leave her there for about 24, 48 hours. And seeing her little body with all these lines in, was hard. And that was the first kind of shock for me because I thought motherhood was going to be quite easy. You go into the delivery, that's the hardest bit. And now it's over and I passed delivery and it's fine. It should be all smooth sailing. That was the first thing that went wrong. And then she came back, and then feeding didn't really work out as I had wanted it to, even though I had gone in with the intention that, we would mix feed so that we can share the load. And I tried to, not put the pressure on myself, even though it was still a bit hard to hear that I needed to stop trying, that my body wasn't doing what I needed it to do. And then I got sick and I ended up in hospital 1 week later for some treatment. And then my chronic illness flared up and I ended up in hospital again. And no medications were working, and I was in and out. I was undergoing multiple investigations. We couldn't figure out why I was getting non-specific pain, I should say. We couldn't figure out the reason. And so I was in and out for multiple procedures, multiple investigations, admitted, brought back out. And it was just like 3 months of real hardship. And on top of that, trying to care for a baby that I had no idea how to help. I think that kind of sparked everything. And in those moments of pain, in those moments of sadness, when I'm sitting there crying or just really sad at my situation and needing God to intervene, I would pray and pray and pray and nothing would happen. And I'm like, in my mind, this wasn't the relationship I had with God. Even if He didn't give me what He wanted, He gave me peace. But I never got that. I never felt that. The pain never went away. The sleep never improved. The flashbacks of her going blue and ending up in the special care nursery never went away. The anxiety just got worse. The sadness just got worse. And I remember I'd pray, and I got to a point where I couldn't say the words anymore. I couldn't bring myself to ask for things anymore, because I'd stand there and I'd say, God, you know what I want. I'm sick of asking. I just want some peace. I just want the pain to go away for a moment so that I can think clearly. And so that never came. And I remember those few months, I remember feeling like I was walking this road alone. I wasn't, clinging to God like I had hoped, when I should have been clinging to Him the most at that point. I felt really empty, and I felt that distance between us. The pain would keep pushing me further away. The sadness would just keep removing Him from my sight completely. And I remember just thinking, when someone is sad with me, and I've got a friend who I've wronged or I know is sad from me for a particular reason, I remember thinking, I don't just leave them. I go buy flowers and I come back and I make it up. I take them out for coffee. And I remember going to my father of confession and saying that exact thing. And he said to me, your bouquet is coming. Sorry. And I just feel like he really was out there picking the flowers, and they were coming. But I just couldn't really see him in this haze. It was just this point in my life where I felt like the way I was feeling, the anxiety, the sadness, was putting between us this veil, and I couldn't see him. I couldn't see him amidst all that. And the walk back to him was hard, but it was beautiful. And the way he would gently remind me of his presence when I finally allowed him to, it really was a testament to his sweetness. That despite everything I said and thought and my lack of commitment to him, despite me turning my back on him completely, he, still spoke to me in the language that I love, in my love language, my own one. And it really, that walk back to him, again, like as hard as it was, And as hard as it was to make that choice to get better and to find him again, it was really filled with such sweetness and such beautiful miracles. And it was truly a testament to how loving and caring and gracious our God is. Like, there is no other God like that. There is no other God who comes down to our level and stoops down to our tiny little selves and, makes himself so relatable.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible, Mirette. Thank you so much for sharing. That is oh, very hard to hear, but a beautiful journey. So I'm really glad that you shared that. I was thinking as you were talking about, that sense of loneliness and feeling, I guess, helpless. Was there also a sense of like, you know, you're a doctor, you're with people in their hardest moments, and you want to be able to help people, and you felt like you couldn't help yourself? Was there an element of that as well?
Definitely. Um, and I remember a lot of the time thinking, God, they've come to the right place for help and we're giving them help. And I need help. I need you to intervene. I need you to do something because I don't know what to do. And when I say he brought patience my way, he really did. And there's a story that I write in the book about a young mum that I met on the wards, who had come in after an overdose, and she's not my patient. I wasn't meant to meet her that day, and it really was destiny that brought us together. There's God definitely needed me to meet her, and I sat with her and asked her if she really meant to end it all. Like, did you overdose for the reason of ending your life, or what was the reason? And she's a young mum. She's got 2 kids. And her response really floored me. She said, I didn't, but I just wanted the pain to go away. And I could not have related to that more. I could not have seen myself in her struggle more. And in my mind, I couldn't help but ask God, why me? Why are you sending me? I can't help her. I'm in this exact same spot and I'm pushing away everyone I love, and I don't know how to get the help I need. But in that moment, I think God reminded me of my ministry in medicine and how I need to treat this job exactly like that. And that there are people out there who need me to help, who need me to be his eyes and ears, who need me to be his hands. And I can't help them if I'm in this pit, if I'm feeling sorry for myself, if I'm not getting the help I need, if I'm not improving so that he can use me. I was more than a broken vessel at the time, and I wasn't willing to be mended. I needed to let him work. I needed to find a way to use me again. And in that moment, when she basically said my thoughts back to me, and her father was sitting there saying, please help her, please, you know, stay in touch or anything. And I questioned how little help I could actually offer. It was in that moment that I truly felt something needs to change.
So was that I don't know if there was a moment, but was that kind of the moment where you're like, okay, I need to let myself be helped. I need to let God in. I need to do, what it takes to get better.
That's exactly right. I think that was the moment. I had a few moments in the lead up to that that were they were a little convicting, and they were forcing me to think about things. And so this was the final straw. This was God saying, I'm just going to give it to you, let you hear it exactly as it should come out from your lips. Like, this is exactly what you're going through. You need to have someone tell it to you in their pain and in their sadness, and maybe to wake you up. And I felt like that was the point that I needed to make changes. And I remember soon after that, I had spoken to one of my other fathers of confession, asking him, I don't feel anything. I don't pray. I don't feel anything towards God right now. And I don't know if I want to find my way back. I wouldn't even know how. I don't even know how to do that. And I remember him saying, I know you're not thankful for anything right now, and I get it, but just start by thanksgiving. Just try giving him thanks. You may not mean it. You won't get through a lot at the start. You'll barely say anything in your first few days or weeks. And that's exactly what ended up happening. He said, but just show up. Just show up. I felt that was the entire walk, just showing up. That walk back, coming back to Christ. I felt like the prodigal son, just showing up, just coming into his presence and being there and letting him work.
Yeah, it's incredible. How else did that journey back look? You reconnected with God, but how else um were you able to kind of make changes?
Yeah, for me, it was the big thing was starting to open up and talk to people. And I've got a friend who's a really close friend and a general practitioner, and I feel like she was really pivotal in my walk back. Just having that outlet to open up and to actually talk through everything, which is essentially counseling, but I got it for free because I had a friend on the inside. Um, and I knew all the tools. I knew that's the other thing. As a doctor, you're like, I should have more insight. I should know better. I should do better, and I didn't. I felt like I was in denial for so long, and I was so furious that God wasn't the one showing up for me. And now, in hindsight, after all these years, it finally makes sense. Like he did show up for me in so many other ways that I just couldn't acknowledge or see in my sadness and in my pain. But I had tools. I knew that I could start doing things slowly to make myself feel better. One of those things was exercising. I took up running, and I felt like running became really cathartic for me. It was just me and my gospel tunes, and I'd pick all the sad ones so that I could really feel the words that were being said and sung. And I just felt like that was more like my prayer time. And then also journaling. I started journaling a lot, and just putting that to paper and telling God exactly how I felt in writing, having it written, and then being able to read it back to myself as a reminder. I felt like that all helped as well. There are so many tools out there for anyone going through these things. I still suffer with, moments of anxiety. I don't have panic attacks, but as a mum, I feel like my mind never stops. I become anxious about things that are completely out of my control. And the only way to help myself in that moment is to give it back to God. Like, God, they are your kids before they are mine. You love them way more than, I love them. And I just need to put this issue or put this non-issue into your hands for you to deal with. And I need to let go. Help me let go. And I've tried to turn those anxieties into prayers as much as I could. But if you meet me, and anyone who knows me knows how much of a helicopter mum I am, and I wear that with pride, a badge of honor. And I just get overwhelmed and anxious at a lot of things, and I've just learnt that I need to hand over my anxieties to God, to the creator of all, who cares about these things. He cares about me. He cares about the details in my life, and he cares about my stresses. He cares about my anxieties. He cares about my sadness. No matter what the world may tell you, as mums, we're told just to soldier on and just pray about it, but it's not that easy when you're struggling. But we've got a God who cares so much about these finer details that some people might not care about, and we just need to learn to hand them to him, and to just get into the practice of turning our worries into prayers, turning our anxieties into prayers.
That is profound. That is something that I think all of us can get on board with, mothers or not. Um, Mirette, you've written this beautiful book called Mama, I See You, Finding Glimpses of Hope Oh, glimmers of hope, sorry, in the trenches of motherhood. Um, what would you say the takeaway message of the book is? What do you want people to get out of it?
Firstly, you're not alone. Whether you're a mum or you're a woman struggling with identity or you just don't know your place in this world, I'm right there with you. I'm not the only one with you. I think we're all in this walk together. We're all struggling together. We're all struggling differently, but the same. So, one, you're not alone. Whatever you're feeling, you're not alone. Someone else has felt the same. Over 2,000 years of life after Christ, you're definitely not alone. This feeling has come up before and it will continue coming up. Two, I think, yes, motherhood is hard. It is very hard. It is, like I said, it was the most trying first couple of years of my life, and it's still really hard for me. Nothing is yours. Your entire self is being emptied out onto someone else, other people, your family, everyone around you. And you don't feel like yourself. But that's okay because God doesn't want the version of yourself that existed before. God wants you now. God wants you in your brokenness. God wants you in your sadness. God wants you in your distance. He wants every part of you. And He's using you for something far greater. But we just need to let Him. And not a single character that I could think of that God worked miracles with in the Bible, not a single character had it all together. And we read of these characters and we talk about the glory of God and His grace and how great He was to transform a situation like that. And then we look at ourselves and we say, but you can't do that with me. I'm too broken. And that's so far from the truth. That's denying the grace of God. That's denying His power, His might. He needs us and He wants us and He loves us just the same. And nothing, no mental health struggle, no sadness, no pain, no sorrow, nothing can separate us from the love of God. And we just need to show up. And if we show up, motherhood becomes transformed from this painful, hard experience to something beautiful and something that only serves to give Him glory if we give it up to Him.
Oh, that's wonderful. Mirette, you also have a podcast. I don't know how you're finding the time to do all these
The
things.
grace of God,
Um,
Georgia, the grace of
yeah,
God. And
okay.
and look, I'm doing all these things, but I wouldn't say I'm doing them well. I'm just showing up.
Showing up. Well, that's the key. That's the key. All right. What kind of conversations are had on the podcast?
So we've my friend and we started this podcast after realizing that service for mums is quite lacking. And we have lots of resources out there, out in the world, other podcasts, other books, things that people can read and listen to help. But specifically in our community, in our Orthodox community, I felt like mums weren't being served. And we had both been praying about it separately. We didn't know how to reach these mums. I was already working on my book at the time. And I remember showing up at her house once and just posing the question, how do you feel about a podcast? I feel like the reach might, we might reach Orthodox Christian mums around the world with a podcast. I don't think there's another platform where we can. And at that exact point, she said, I was praying for the exact same thing. I was praying for the exact same avenue, something for us to do to reach these mums. And so it was a no-brainer. We just started. And the conversations we have on these podcasts are what we call taboo conversations that we don't really talk about in our church communities. We don't talk about in our mum communities. Things like mental health, things like intimacy after marriage, after having kids. Things like we don't really discuss but need to be discussed because they're problems and they're things that lots of us mums are struggling with. And we bring lots of guests on there to talk about, these things. We have counselors who's come on to talk about mum guilt and dealing with anxiety and just reshaping our thoughts. And it's just really to bring light, bring these struggles, I should say, to light, and just open up the conversations for other mums to have, and to see that two mums who are quite active in their church communities, talking very candidly about these struggles, that it is okay to talk about and it's encouraged. And we try and destigmatize a lot of these things, or that's what we're working towards. So it's really just in the baby phases. We've had 2 seasons, or we're kind of closing up our second season now. But, that's the hope for the future, to try and just keep talking about these issues that don't get spoken about.
Yeah, you are definitely one book, one podcast episode at a time, one interview at a time. You are changing the conversation around motherhood, and that is something that is so so important, Mirette. I really hope that you realize how important the work is that you're doing, because I think it's going to change a lot of people. So thank you.
I think in the end, this work is a communal work. No matter how much we strive and we try and bring to light these struggles and actually just talk about them, if our hand is not in God's, it's futile, the conversation that we'll have. And in the end, we need to hold each other's hands too. And that's the whole reason the book is called Mama, I See You. Our God sees, and it was inspired by the story of Hagar in the Old Testament, where she named him as the God who sees. In her pain and loneliness, she called him out as the God who sees, and he is. And we need to be his eyes here on earth. And what better eyes than other mums going through the same thing? And just noticing the issues and noticing each other, I think, is a beautiful thing. And we're here for each other. And we just need to be a bit more communal in all of these things as well. So talking about this struggle, bring your girlfriends together, bring your mum friends together, and open up a candid conversation and just see what happens. See how many people open up and how many people come out of that saying, thank you for talking about it, or that was something I really needed to get off my chest. So that service is something we could all do, which I think I would love to see. It would be really nice. But it's a life commitment, but it's hard work that needs to be done.
What a brilliant way to end. Mirette Abraham, it has been such a joy having you on Finding Hope today. Thank you so much for joining me, for sharing your story and the incredible work you're doing, not only as a doctor, a mum, an author, a podcaster, just a human. You're great, and I'm so glad we got to meet.
Thank you so much, Georgia. Like I said, it's been an honor for me and a true blessing to be interviewed by you. So thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me meet you. This is great. And thank you for your podcast. It's really good. Thank you.